Okay, so today is the third lecture, the third video on quantum symmetries and quantum arithmetic. And we will talk about planar algebra. The last two videos was about von Neumann algebra and subfactor, and the next video will be about quantum arithmetic. Today, planar algebra. So at the end of the last video, we said that we will see planar algebra as a diagrammatic axiomatization of the standard invariant. The planar algebra can be seen as the underlying quantum symmetries associated to the subfactor. If you see the subfactor as analogous to a field extension, an inclusion of field, then the analogous of the Galois group of the field extension is the planar algebra. The planar algebra is the underlying quantum symmetries of the subfactor, and it is a diagrammatic axiomatization of the standard invariant. I should mention here, before starting about planar algebra, that there is other way to encode the quantum symmetries. One way is called lambda lattice due to Sorin-Popa, and one other way is called paragroup due to Adrian Ocneanu. But today we will discuss planar algebra due to Vaughan Jones. So first, we need to introduce the notion of planar tangle. So a shaded planar tangle is a data of finitely many input disks. This one, this one, this one are input disks. One output disk. This is the output disk. Non-intersecting string. This is the non-intersecting string. That. Giving an even number, say 2n, interval per disk. So you see this string cut the disk into an even number of intervals. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. And here for the output disk also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And among this interval for each disk, we select one, we mark one with a star, like that. Each disk, input or output, is marked by one star, selecting one interval. Here, this star marks this interval, this star marks this interval, this star marks this interval, and this star marks this interval. So, the star is put between these two strings, but outside the input disk. For the input disk, the star is put outside, and for the output disk, the star is put inside. Okay. And finally, the planar tangle are defined, in fact, up to isotopy. So this planar tangle is defined up to smooth deformation. we can compose two planar tangles. So to compose two planar tangles, you have one planar tangle here, one other here, and we need some assumption. We cannot compose randomly. So to compose two planar tangles here, the second one will be put inside the input disk, one input disk of the first one. For so, we need that the properties of the output disk of the second one should be equivalent, should be the same than the properties of the input disk in which we want to put it. So what does this mean? This means that we want to compose with that inside this one. For so, we need to have the same number of intervals. So 1, 2, 3, 4 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, it's okay. The same shading. So I forgot in the previous slide to mention that the area delimited by the string are shaded. This is a shaded part, unshaded, and the shading is alternating because of the even property, shaded and shaded, shaded and shaded, and we can see that it's alternating like that. There is no two area with the same shading, and the inside of an input disk is not an area. So the area are what is outside the input disk. And you see that it's completely alternating. So the shading, so to compose, the number of interval here should be the same number of interval here, the same shading, and the star should also coincide. So if everything coincides like that, we can put this here, like it is shown here, and then we just need to remove the border. So you remove the extra border like that, and you remove the two stars, and what you get is the composition of these two and we choose here. We see that we cannot compose this one here because there is not the same number of interval, and we cannot compose this one here because here the star is in a shaded part and here the star is in an unshaded part. So here there is only one way to compose these two planar tangles. In general, you can have no way or one way or several ways. So the set of planar tangles with such composition is called the planar operade. So planar operade. So now we can define what is a planar algebra. Intuitively, we can see the planar algebra as a representation of the planar operade. The planar algebra is a representation of the planar algebra. What does this mean? More precisely, this means that it's a family of vector spaces, Pn plus or minus. And here you see that we use the same notation than at the end of the last video for the higher relative commutant. here, because this will be exactly here where this will be the same in the case of a subfactor planar algebra. But in general, so you have a family of vector spaces, and this family of vector spaces are called n boxes. And the n, so you have the n will correspond to the number of interval of the output disk. So the planar operad act on this family of vector space. So for any tangle T with one output disk and R input disk such that the output disk has 2n0 interval and the input disk are 2n1, 2n2, etc. up to 2nr interval, respectively, then this tangle acts on the family of vector space like that. There is a multilinear map from the tensor product of each of the vector space, each of the n box space corresponding to the number of interval, n1 for 2n1 interval, etc. And the plus or minus correspond to the shading of the mark interval. Plus or minus for shaded or unshaded. Such maps are called partition function, and this name comes from physics. It's a notion which comes from physics. Partition function. And this map should satisfy the following diagram. The following diagram, every such following diagrams must commute. So let's have a look to this diagram. Here, you see, we start from P2 minus tensor P1 plus tensor P1 plus. According to what we said before, this corresponds to this should correspond to the input disk here. So you have minus corresponding to star in a shaded part. And you have 1, 2, 3, 4 interval. So 4 is 2 times 2. So it's 2 P2 minus. So this corresponds to this. And here, you have this one and this one. Both are 1 plus, correspond to an input disk with 2 interval and the star in the unshaded part. So to be rigorous, because here we have 2 input disks of the same type, we need to order them to choose which one corresponds to that and which one corresponds to this one. But you got the idea. And this one corresponds to the output disk. So the star is in unshaded part. So it's plus, and there is 6 interval. So you start from the input disk, input like In computer science, you have input and you get output. So let's mention here that this one is not an input disk, but it's a string which it's closed. So we did not see that in the first slide, but here, when we composed here, we produced, because of that and that, we produced a string which is closed. It's not an input disk, it's a closed string. You see that the input disks are bold here. So it's okay for this one. What about this part and this part? This part and this part correspond to the composition we saw before. You have this and this equal this. This is the composition. This is the composition of this and this. And we need such diagram to commute. This is the main assumption, the main axioms of planar algebra. So here, let's see here. Here we see, okay, how is it possible? Here we have three space, three input disk, okay, but here we see we have only one. So how it works? Here it works in the sense that we put identity for the two spaces which are not represented inside here. So here it's the partition function. Here it's only this one corresponding to this space in the middle. And so you go from this one to this one. This space is the middle, this space is the middle, and the two other spaces are, you put identity so it does not appear in the tangle. So 1 plus inside the star is in the unshaded part. There are two intervals, 1 plus. And outside, unshaded part, so plus, and you have 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's 2 plus. So it's okay. From this one in the middle, this one in the middle, and for the other two, it's identity. From here to here, it's okay. This is the same. There is no identity here. So you have 2 minus 2 plus 1 plus. So minus correspond to the star in the shaded part. 2, so 1, 2, 3, 4 interval, okay. 2 plus, 1 plus, same thing. So, what does this mean that the diagram commutes? So you have the composition of tangle, you have this representation, you have a planar algebra, which is a family of spaces, which is in some sense a representation of the planar tangle, of the planar operad, given by this such multilinear map. And when you represent it diagrammatically, we must assume that every such diagram commute. So this is an example, of course. So this should work for every such diagram, every composition in the planar operad. All the partition function like that. So you compose this partition function, this one with this one, and you should be equal to this one. This is a definition of a planar algebra. So here is the first example, temporally algebra. The first example of planar algebra. So before talking about planar algebra, let's mention the planar algebra where you take as space the space generated by every planar tangle. It's, in some sense, it's the representation of the planar opera by itself. You take itself like this look like, for example, the left regular representation of a group. You represent the group with itself in some sense. You use itself as the representation. Here, you use all the planar tangle and the planar algebra generated by the planar tangle. So here, provide a planar algebra also. So you take as a space the space Tn plus minus generated by the planar tangle having to an interval on their output disk, to an interval in the output disk, and the black or white star interval according to plus or minus. So this is first way to make a planar algebra directly using the planar operand, using the planar algebra generated by the planar operand itself. Now, there is, so this is not that much used. In fact, perhaps this should be used more. This can be should be useful to consider this planar algebra and to make some quotient, to consider some sub-planar algebra, make some decomposition, I don't know, like for the left regular representation. But here is one sub-planar algebra of this one, which is highly developed and highly used in the theory, which is the Temperley-Lib planar algebra. And we already mentioned this name, Temperley-Lib algebra, in the previous video. And in fact, this algebra is isomorphic to the Temperley-Lib algebra, is the same as the Temperley-Lib algebra we mentioned before. And here is a model with planar tangle. So it's a sub-planar algebra of this one. But here we consider only the tangle without input disk. So no input disk. So you consider, so only the output disk is considered here. There is no input disk in this planar subalgebra. So here, for example, the space, the 3-box TL3 plus delta. So there is an extra parameter here called delta. We will see here where this delta will deal with the string, the closed string. So here is the 3-box space plus TL3 plus. So here are all the possible planar tangle without input disk such that the star is in an unshaded part. Up to equivalence, there are exactly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 such planar tangles. So it generates a space of dimension 5. And Here we will explain what is the use of this delta. In fact, the delta, for example, if you compose these two, this one and this one, so you have this one is a planar rectangle without input. There is an input disk here, sorry. So let me restate. So planar, so we need to be careful. You have the planar algebra, the planar operad act on the planar algebra. It's a representation. But here, the representation is also given by tangle. So the planar operad here, so here we can allow input disk act on the representation here, which is temporary algebra, and this is generated by planar operad without input disk. There is no input disk here. So it acts like that. What you get is something without input disk, but we should remove the closed string. And this is the role of this parameter delta. So in this example, we see that two closed strings appear. And the closed string should be removed and replaced by a multiplication by delta. Here, you have two closed strings. And so you multiply 2 times by delta, delta square. And here you have a shaded closed string and an unshaded closed string, same delta. Okay. The dimension of the n-box space turns out to be the Catalan number, which is a very famous number in algebraic combinatorics. So 2n choose n divided by n plus 1. So this is the two first example of the planar algebra. And this one will be very used in the theory. We will explain. So now we can define what is a subfactor planar algebra. So as the name is, say, subfactor planar algebra, this will be, they will have theorem later saying that this is exactly the planar algebra that appear from a subfactor. But as you see here, this is defined independently of the subfactor. It's called the subfactor planar algebra because we will see that every such planar algebra can be related to a subfactor, and every subfactor gives such a planar algebra in some very large cases. We will explain later. But this notion of subfactor planar algebra is introduced, is defined independently of the notion of subfactor. This is a purely independent definition. So for people who prefer diagrammatic approach, algebraic approach, you can just start from here, in fact, if you prefer. It's good to know, it's good to have an overview of what is von Neumann algebra, what is subfactor, what is, because this provide root, this show where all this stuff come from. And this sometime can be also useful in some special case. For example, if you consider subfactors which are of infinite index or infinite depth, sometimes it is not enough to consider only the subfactor planar algebra. We need to do analysis when it is not infinite. When it is infinite index, infinite depth, as we see, for example, with the theorem of Vasse-Brottier, there are some analysis. But in the finite depth, finite index, or more general, the amenable case, there, everything can be done in some sense algebraically. Everything reduced to the standard invariant, everything reduced to the planar algebra. So we can start in this nice case. The nice case, you can, if you want, you can directly start from that, independently of what we said before. So what is a subfactor planar algebra? So a subfactor planar algebra, so it's a planar algebra, it's a planar star algebra. So each n box, so there is a star structure. So we will explain the star structure. So there is a star structure as for the sister algebra, as for the star algebra we mentioned before in the first video, there is an adjoint. So to the adjoint we will explain here. So here are 4 assumptions for a subfactor planar algebra. First assumption, each space, each n box space must be finite dimensional. Second assumption, the 0 box space should be one-dimensional. Third assumption, spherical. So what spherical mean? You have an equality between a right trace and left trace. So let's explain that. So you take a generic element of the n box space. So generically, an element of an n box space is written, you have an element A, and it is written using the identity tangle. So identity tangle. So this is equal to this. You apply them. So you have a tangle here with one output disk and one input disk, and you put A inside. And this is A, this is identity tangle, and you represent, usually we represent the element like that. So here, it's an element in the n box space, so you have 2n interval. Here the star is in the unshaded part, so this is an element in Pn plus. So we wrote Pn plus Pn minus because we want to make it generic, but in this case it's plus. What is a trace? The trace is the right trace. So you take that, and in fact, you close, how to say? So you have this n box element, and you close every string like that. So you start from the top, and you go to the bottom like that, etc., like that. So this is a tangle. it's not identity egal. In fact, it's a tangle. You start from an n box element and you go to the 0 box. So what you get is an element in the 0 box space. And we see that by assumption, it is evaluable. So one-dimensional. So what is that? This is a constant. This is a complex number by definition, by assumption. So the trace of an n-box space is just applying this tangle. You apply this tangle, and this tangle say that you just close like that. So you start from an n-box element, and you inside is n box, outside is 0. So it's a map from, this is a map from Pn plus or minus to P0 plus or minus. And if you put this on the right, this is the right trace, but you can also put it on the left. And this is called the left trace. And you have to add this multiplicative constant, delta power minus n. So there is a multiplicative constant. There is a parameter, delta also, here. And spherical means that the right trace is equal to the left trace. What does this mean? It's like this string. You can move it from right to left, passing through a sphere. Assume that you are in some sphere, and you can move from right to left, or from left to right, this string. And this is the meaning of the fact that the right trace is equal to the left trace. This is like if you are in a sphere. So this assumption is called spherical. And the last assumption is the existence of so this inner product. You can define an inner product. So this inner product use the trace, use the adjoint defined here, and use this multiplication operation. So you have this tangle, which is a multiplication tangle. You start from two n-box elements, A, B, and you put it in this tangle. This tangle, there are two input disks, one output disk. So it's like a binary operation. So you have this multiplication. Let's mention here the philosophy of planar algebra. Here you can redefine the multiplication. So you have the binary operation. And usually in mathematics, you have operations. So you make some multiplication, addition, but you can, when you write an algebraic operation, you do everything linearly. So when you have to do a complicated algebraic operation, so you have, I don't know, 2 plus 3 times 4, everything divided by 2, etc. You can do every operation one by one, linearly. You do first the multiplication, then the addition, and then the division, one by one, one by one. The philosophy of planar algebra is that it's a planar operation. It's no more linear. Is that you do several operations at the same time. If you have two like that, it's like a usual operation, one multiplication, but you can put several things, and it's like a generalization of the algebraic operation, but done planarly. It's no more linearly, it's no more one by one. Here you do everything in the same time. This is the philosophy of planar algebra. So here it's the way. So let's come back to the fourth assumption of subfactor planar algebra. Here, this is a way to make the multiplication. So you have this multiplication tangle, and you put A, B inside in this order. And what you get is, so this is n box element, and what you get is also an n box element. So this go from Pn plus tensor Pn plus to Pn plus, or Pn minus tensor Pn minus to Pn minus. So it's a multiplication on the n box space. And here we will define how to make the star an adjoint. So the n box space, according to that and the adjoint, is a star algebra, a finite dimensional star algebra. So it is just a direct sum of factor of type 1, n. So n here is not the same that the n here of type 1 finite type 1. So this can be seen as a direct sum of matrix algebra, of finite dimensional matrix algebra. So here is how so you have a star structure, and how the star structure, the adjoint, deal with the tangle. So we see that the action of a tangle is given by a partition function. And how? So this is an element of some n box space, and you have this adjoint. We assume the existence of this adjoint. And this is how the adjoint should deal with the partition function. So you have all that adjoint should be equal to this one, where the tangle is given. You take the adjoint of the tangle, and what is the adjoint of a tangle? This is the mirror image. So the mirror image. So yeah, you have a tangle, and you can make a mirror image of a tangle, and you get T star. And inside here, this is the adjoint given on the n box space. So the adjoint of everything is the adjoint of, you put adjoint everything inside. And we must, the tangle action must deal with the adjoint as like that. If you have that, this is a subfactor planar algebra. So this is a shortcut to access to quantum symmetries, to finite quantum symmetries. Here is, so we already define planar algebra. But the question is, are this planar algebra, this temporally planar algebra, is it a subfactor planar algebra or not? So here, so the tiny analytical part in the definition of subfactor planar algebra is this force assumption. Everything is algebraic except this force assumption. You have the inner product given by the trace and the multiplication and the adjoint should be, so this should be really an inner product. This should satisfy all the assumption of an inner product. In particular, you have the positivity assumption. And is it satisfied in this case? We will see that it is almost, but not exactly. We need to make some quotient and we need to select the good, some good delta. So let's see. So by positivity, the positivity, so if you have the inner product of an element with itself, this should be non-negative, and it is non-zero if and only if the element is non-zero. Particular, because the inner product with itself defines what is called the norm of A. So if in this algebraic fashion, from that, if you get algebraically, if you get something which is negative, it's like if you have a vector of negative norm. So this is not possible. This should be excluded. This is called, sometimes you can see that as called as ghost. A ghost is a vector of negative norm. So it's not really a norm. So the no-ghost theorem is a theorem which says for which delta you have no ghost. So there is no ghost, there is no element such that the inner product, which is this operation defined here, provide something with negative like that. So this does not appear if only if the delta is in this set. And you see that this set is exactly the set given by the Jones theorem on all the possible indices. You just have to take delta square. So this is a set for delta, but the set for delta square is exactly the set of possible indices, the Jones theorem. And this is, in fact, this is correct because every subfactor of index delta square, we will see that for every subfactor of index delta square, if you consider the subfactor planar algebra, there is a subfactor planar algebra which is a temporary lib with this delta. So that's why this corresponds to all the possible indices. The square of that corresponds to all the possible indices. So let's come back to that. This is a no-ghost theorem. So there is no vector of negative norm in some sense, for which this operation is negative, if and only if delta is in this set. So you can, in fact, it's a funny game. You can do that as an exercise. In fact, you can try to start from the temporary algebra, and you take a delta, which is here less than 2, but not in this set. I don't know, for example, you take anything which is not in this set, less than 2. And you can for fun, you can try to make a vector of negative like that. This is possible. In fact, there is for the small n box, you see that the positivity, you can reformulate everything in terms of matrix, and I don't remember. Yeah, it's in terms of matrix, in terms of characteristic polynomial or some stuff like that. And you can cook some vector of negative norm, negative for this operation when delta is not there. Okay. So assume now delta is there. It's not enough. We need also that. So this should be positive. So the norm of an element is non-zero if only if this operation is non-zero if and only if the element is non-zero. So you need to quotient by the null ideal. So all the elements for which this operation is 0. And for delta less than 2, the null ideal is non-trivial. And for delta greater than 2, if I am not mistaken, the null ideal is trivial. But in general, it's non-trivial, so you have to quotient. So you take the temporary algebra, delta in this set, and you quotient by the ideal generated by the element for which this operation is 0. And what you get is a temporally, it's a subfactor planar algebra called the temporally Jones subfactor planar algebra. So we add Jones here. Before this was the temporally planar algebra. And when you select the good delta and you quotient, this is the temporally Jones subfactor planar algebra. In fact, this subfactor planar algebra correspond are the subfactor planar, are the planar algebra given by the subfactor of principal graph, the Dynkin diagram AN. And it's a fundamental subfactor planar algebra. As I said, any subfactor planar algebra with constant delta admit this subfactor planar algebra as a planar subalgebra. So it's always, this is a fundamental subfactor planar algebra because it is always inside any subfactor planar algebra with this constant delta. So it appears everywhere. And here it's a generalization of this temporally Jones algebra. And the idea here is that now you consider two parameters. Here you have one subfactor planar algebra with one delta, and here you have one subfactor and you consider one intermediate. You say there is a subfactor with one intermediate, and the first intermediate is of index delta 1 square, and the second intermediate of index delta 2 square. And generically, every such planar algebra Every subfactor planar algebra with an intermediate, so that the first intermediate is this index is equal to this index, then there always exists, as before, a planar subalgebra called the Beach-Jones subfactor planar algebra, also called before the Fuchs-Catalan subfactor planar algebra. And it can be defined algebraically, diagrammatically, as before, but now you need to allow two colors of string. Here you have one color of string, black, and and we see that the delta, the parameter, correspond to when you remove one closed string. Now you have two colors of string. When you remove one closed string of one color, you multiply by delta 1, and if it is the other color, you multiply by delta 2. You have two colors as before. So same construction as before. As before, you need to be careful about the ghost. You need to caution by some ideal, etc. And what you get is the two parameter generalization, the Beach-Jones subfactor planar algebra, which is always a planar subalgebra of a subfactor planar algebra with intermediate, such that subfactor planar algebra, so a planar algebra corresponding to a subfactor with an intermediate, so that on the left is given by the parameter delta 1, on the right, given by the parameter delta 2. This always appears. This is universal. This is very deep, in fact. This is a universal planar algebra. There are universal subfactor planar algebra. They appear everywhere. This appears everywhere, and once you have, as long as you have an intermediate, this appears also. So it's a universal object, appear everywhere. So now, what about quantum group? We said that planar algebra are encode the quantum symmetries inside underlying the subfactor. And quantum group is a specific example of quantum symmetries. And there is a way to define the quantum group directly in terms of subfactor planar algebra. So, Cody-Hallam, Landau-Sunder, Das Cody-Hallam prove that there is a subfactor planar algebra encoding any finite dimensional of sister algebra, also called Katz algebra, also called finite quantum group. In particular, any finite group, of course, defined by generator and relation. And so there is a way to do that. And a Katz algebra, so this corresponds to up to isomorphism to an irreducible subfactor planar algebra of depth 2. So as we said, depth 2, in fact, depth 2 can be, the depth can be recovered directly from at the planar algebra level, because we said that using the Bratelli diagram, you can recover, as we said in the previous video, the Bratelli diagram is given by all by the n-box space, by the decomposition of the n-box space into matrix algebra. And the Bratelli diagram is just the type of each n-box space as decomposition type. And as we said before, we can recover the principal graph, and the length of the principal graph is the depth. So the depth is completely can be read directly from the planar algebra. So you can assume depth 2 and irreducible just mean that the first relative commutant, so P1, so the one box space is one-dimensional. In the subfactor theory, so irreducible is you have a subfactor n in M. So irreducible means the element in M which commute with n, this should be a one-dimensional algebra. In other words, this means that the one box space, this is exactly the same thing that the one box space is one-dimensional. So irreducible means one-dimensional one box space. So irreducible depth 2 can be written directly, can be understood directly from subfactor planar algebra. So a subfactor planar algebra, which is irreducible of depth 2, it's exactly a finite quantum group. This is nothing but a finite quantum group. This is a finite quantum group. Subfactor planar algebra, by definition, the delta is finite. Everything is finite dimensional. So a finite quantum group, a finite dimensional Katz algebra, or a finite dimensional of-sister algebra, it is exactly an irreducible depth 2 subfactor planar algebra. This is exactly that. And this can be completely defined in the planar algebra framework very easily. Okay. So if you want to see the details, you go to these papers. A finite group subfactor planar algebra, so in particular, if you consider, you can take the example of a finite group. It remembers a group, as we said before, in the previous video, but what we did not say before is that it does not necessarily remember an inclusion of group, a group subgroup subfactor planar algebra. It's not necessarily remembered. So if you take a subfactor planar algebra of irreducible depth 2 corresponding to a group, and you take an intermediate, there is a way to make intermediate subfactor planar algebra. You take an intermediate corresponding to a subgroup, or if you are in the framework of subfactor, you take a group subgroup subfactor. In general, you will not remember the inclusion of group, more precisely the core-free inclusion of group, because you can always make non-equivalent, non-different inclusion of group. If you make a direct product with anything. You take two different inclusions, but you can just divide. So this should be core-free. Core-free means you can no more divide by something. So this means that any normal subgroup here, intersection with that is trivial. This means core-free. So when it is core-free, then there is no way to simplify. And a group subgroup subfactor planar algebra. So the group subgroup subfactor planar algebra are developed in a paper by Vedgupta. In general, do not remember the inclusion. The first example was given by Cody, Alam, and Sunder. And in fact, 2 years later, so this is the example given by Cody, Alam, and Sunder. You take the group S4. And you have two subgroups here of order 4. These two subgroups provide an equivalent core-free inclusion, but equivalent subfactor and equivalent subfactor planar algebra. So the group subgroup subfactor planar algebra do not remember, in general, the inclusion of group. And Izumi, 2 years after Cody Alam and Sunder, provided a complete group theoretical characterization of where it is. So what it said? A group theoretical characterization of what happened here. He said that so two inclusions are not, in general, you can have two core-free inclusions which are not equivalent group in terms of group, but which are equivalent in terms of subfactor, group, subgroup, subfactor. So we can say it's a von Neumann equivalent or subfactor equivalent. Izumi, in his paper, provided a complete group theoretical characterization of what is subfactor equivalent for an inclusion of group, inspired by this example given by Cody Alam and Sunder. Okay, so here we consider quantum group, in fact, with a star structure, positive quantum group, unitary quantum group. But in fact, if you go beyond the subfactor planar algebra assumption, if you go beyond the positivity, you can define a planar algebra exactly as before, but without the positivity of the assumption of subfactor planar algebra. So you have only a planar algebra, but you can define a planar algebra associated to a of algebra which is without star structure. You need a semi-simple and co-semi-simple of algebra over an algebraic field can be encoded in a planar algebra by generator and relation, exactly as before. And it corresponds to a connected. So connected means evaluable. So this is this assumption. Irreducible, as we said. So one box space is one dimension. Spherical. Spherical. So the left trace equal to the right trace. Non-degenerate. So non-degenerate mean that mean what? Means that there is no element of norm 0. Any element of norm 0 for which this operation is 0 should be 0, non-degenerate, with delta different from 0 and of depth 2. So depth 2, here we said that depth 2 can be completely characterized in terms of planar algebra. Here there is a way. Depth 2 in the irreducible finite dimensional case just means that the 3 box is a factor, a type 1 factor. But here we have, this is non-degenerate, but we don't have the positivity. So we can have ghost. There is nothing for which this is 0 when inside it is non-zero, but you can have some ghost, you can have something negative. But this is in fact the difference between a unitary of this algebra and a general of algebra. So in the general case, you can have some ghost or some something. So, but in fact, okay. So okay. So here is the theorem giving the link between subfactor and subfactor planar algebra. So I recall here that the planar algebra of the subfactor is like the Galois group of a field extension. This is the slogan. The slogan of the topic. And here, this is the big theorem of planar algebra. A planar algebra is a subfactor planar algebra if and only if it is given by the standard invariant. If and only this is the higher relative commutant defined in the previous video of an extremal subfactor of index the square of delta. And as we said, these are the higher relative commutant defined like that. And what extremal mean? So first, let's say that a finite depth or an irreducible subfactor is always extremal. So in this kind, the nice case, it's always extremal. So extreme, non-extremal subfactor appear in some exotic or some singular case. Extremal mean that the trace of the commutant of n equal to the trace of the commutant of m when you are in the algebra of element of m which commute with n. So you see that if it is irreducible, this is one dimensional. So obviously, because the trace is unital, obviously this is equal. So obviously, irreducible is extremal. In general, you need to have this assumption. This is extremal assumption. So under this assumption, any subfactor planar algebra, a subfactor is a subfactor planar algebra if and only if it is given by the standard invariant of an extremal subfactor, proved by Sorin Popa, Cody Allam-Sunder, Guionnet, Jones, Schlecht and Co. This, in general, the subfactor you can make from a subfactor planar algebra do not involve hyperfinite to n factor. It involves to n factor, but not hyperfinite. The construction is given by using the free group factor, where the free group has infinitely many generators. As we said in the previous video, it's an open problem for which, if you consider the subfactor, the principal graph Dynkin diagram et infinity, for which index greater than 4, it can be modelized, represented with hyperfinite subfactor with hyperfinite factor. But it can always be represented by the factor given by the free group factor with infinitely many generators. So this is a universal way to make model of subfactor planar algebra. And let's recall what we said in the previous video, that the subfactor planar algebra, the standard, remember the subfactor if it is amenable. For example, finite depth, hyperfinite subfactor. So in the amenable case, the subfactor planar algebra remembers the subfactor. Which means that there is only there is no non-equivalent subfactor with the same subfactor planar algebra. So here we said that there is here if you start from subfactor planar algebra, this paper shows that we can make a model using this free group factor. But in general, in the other way, you can start from a subfactor, you can make a subfactor planar algebra, but you can start from a subfactor given by a hyperfinite factor if you want. Which is the case for the amenable, in fact. For amenable, you need hyperfinite factor. And you need also the principal graph to be amenable. But then the subfactor planar algebra remember the subfactor in the amenable case. So it's universal, it's a complete invariant. It completely encodes the quantum, as we stated before, it completely encodes the quantum symmetries. So in the amenable case, the quantum symmetries are completely encoded in the subfactor planar algebra. So if you are interested in finite quantum symmetries, you can directly consider subfactor planar algebra. You don't really need to go through analysis if you are interested in finite quantum symmetries. If you are interested in infinite quantum symmetries, some subfactor with infinite index, infinite depth, sometimes it's not enough to consider this diagrammatic approach. At least it's not yet known how to completely make this infinite quantum symmetry in terms of diagram. It's still work in progress. So as I said also before, the classification for index between 4 and 5.25 was done at the level, was done in the framework of planar algebra. So this is the classification of subfactor planar algebra. And this was done by listing all the possible principal graphs in the what is called the Hagerup way. This was initiated by Hoof Hagerup together with several criterion like the cyclotomic criterion, which means that the delta should be the index should be cyclotomic. So if you have a graph, the square norm of a graph is not always cyclotomic in general. So if you make some list of graphs, you can just keep the one for which the square norm is cyclotomic. So it's a way. So you list some graph, then you restrict to the one with cyclotomic, with this cyclotomic criterion, among other criterion. There is a theorem, embedding theorem due to Jones and Penny. Embedding theorem, what is the point of the embedding theorem? The embedding theorem is that from a principal graph, you can make a planar algebra. So there is a way to make a planar algebra from a principal graph. And the embedding theorem says that the subfactor, so you start from a subfactor, you make its subfactor planar algebra. You have its principal graph. You make the planar algebra given by this principal graph, and the embedding theorem says that the subfactor planar algebra can be embedded in the principal graph planar algebra. So if you want to make a subfactor, you don't know only what you know is the principal graph. You make the principal graph planar algebra and you try to find inside using several techniques. You need to find a subfactor planar algebra. So using the embedding theorem. So it's a way to make a subfactor planar algebra only from the principal graph. So it's not always possible because, as we said, sub-principal graphs are not the principal graph of the subfactor, but when it is, then it is always inside the subfactor planar algebra. It's always inside the principal graph planar algebra. So you can find it here. If it exists, you can find it here. And it also uses the jellyfish algorithm. And the jellyfish algorithm, what is the point of that? The point of the jellyfish algorithm is to evaluate the planar tangle. To evaluate the, so you have the example here. Here you have an evaluation. You use the trace of A. You have here it's one-dimensional. The jellyfish algorithm, it's a method which it's an algorithm permitting to find the which number correspond to some one box, 0 box, like that, but more complicated than that. You can have some very complicated thing, and the jellyfish algorithm show you how to evaluate this. And once you can do that, this is a main tool to make a subfactor planar algebra. So, for example, one of the, you can go to this paper of Bigelow, Peters, Morrison, Snyder, constructing the extended Hagerup subfactor planar algebra. So this is the subfactor of 7 supertransitivity we discussed in the previous video. And they were able to make the corresponding subfactor planar algebra using these techniques. So they started from the principal graph, and they were able to make the subfactor planar algebra using embedding theorem and jellyfish algorithm. So the paper is very deep. It's published in a very, very good journal. And you see here that the planar algebra is a good way to make new example, to make some exotic example. To make example without model coming from previous known mathematics. Because you touch here the real combinatorics underlying these quantum symmetries. You touch the reality of what it is really beyond the model. In fact, this is that. So you have this is, in fact, what I did not say, that such construction is done by generator and relation. In fact, these are made by generator, a finitely many generator, and finitely many relation. A bit like, for example, in geometric group theory, you can define a group with a presentation. For example, a finitely presented group. You have finitely many generator, finitely many relation. In some sense, such construction are generalization of that. You can make some quantum symmetries by generator and relation. And you have some universal way process to do that. Now, what about Fourier transform? So there is a way to define a Fourier transform on subfactor planar algebra. Here we only need to consider the Fourier transform on the two-box space. So you take a subfactor planar algebra, P, and you consider the two-box space, P2 plus or minus. And you consider a map, F, which will be the generalization of the Fourier transform, which go from P2 plus to P2 minus, or P2 minus to P2 plus. This map called the Fourier transform, it's also called one click of the outer star. Why? Because it can be represented diagrammatically like that. So this map is a tangle. It's like the identity tangle, but you put the star from here to here. One click, 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 click. So it's like a click. So the rotation of the outer star like that. So this is completely easy. This is easy. You have you just rotate the outer star. You start from the identity tangle like that. So in the two-box space, and you do one click of the outer star. So this is easy. This is a Fourier transform. So the planar algebra framework is really good for the Fourier transform, in fact. In some other framework, to define a Fourier transform, in particular, if you want to define a Fourier transform in the framework of sister algebra, of quantum group, purely in terms of quantum group, or if you want to define the Fourier transform in terms of subfactor analytically, or in operator algebra, this can be very complicated. Here, it's diagrammatically, this is very easy. And so from the Fourier transform, as usual, you define the convolution product. Here, it's called coproduct, but it's not the co-multiplication of quantum group. This is a coproduct. Here, coproduct means convolution product. It's a binary. It starts from two elements and you get one. It's not a co-multiplication. Coproduct. It's a binary operation, and it's given by this diagram. So this tangle. So you put two ABs. It's two box, and you get another two box. And this is, in some sense, the dual of the multiplication defined here. here you have multiplication vertically here, and here, with this shape, this triangle defines the coproduct. And in fact, it is related to the multiplication using the Fourier transform. In fact, the coproduct A star B is a Fourier transform of the product of these two elements, the inverse Fourier transform of A times the inverse Fourier transform of B. So in some sense, it's a dual of the multiplication. If you apply 2 times the Fourier transform, so 2 click, 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 it is called the contragradient. Or if you rotate like that, 180 degrees. The contragradient, noted like that with another line like that, a line, over line like that. And you see, because we are in a 2-box space, if you make that 4 times, here we make that 2 times. And by making that 2 times, it's like you rotate, you reverse, in fact. 180 rotation, you reverse. But if you make that 4 times, click, 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 you come back to the initial things. So 4 times is the identity. So you see here that the contragradient of the contragradient is the identity. In the quantum group case, the Katz algebra, for Katz algebra, Hopf-Sister algebra, the contragradient is exactly the antipode. And the antipode correspond, for the finite group, correspond to the inverse. The antipode is a generalization, the quantum group generalization of the notion of inverse in finite group. In the framework of planar algebra, the antipode is just 2 click. Click, click. So it's fantastic. This is so easy. So start from a subfactor, n in M. Associated to a subfactor planar algebra, P. So SPA is the initial for subfactor planar algebra. So this is quite long to write, to always write subfactor planar algebra. So now I write only the initial, SPA. So let n in M a subfactor associated to a subfactor planar algebra P. Assume it to be irreducible. So the 1-box space is 1-dimensional. So here there is a mistake. It should be n prime inside intersection with M. So let's note that. So I found several mistakes in the slide. In fact, you can see the slide will be available online, and they will be updated. So every mistake will be fixed. So here it's a mistake. It's not M1, it's M. So this will be fixed in the updated slide. So irreducible. And consider an intermediate K you can define, as before, we define when we talk about the basic construction, we define this projection, but you can define the projection for this subfactor with the intermediate. You have a projection as before, but for this one. And it turned out that this projection is inside the two-box space. So in the case of k equal m or k equal n, this projection can be represented with this tangle. So E1, which is the original projection when we discussed about basic construction, can be represented diagrammatically like that. Inverse of delta with this temporally lib tangle. So tangle without input disk, two box. And with m equal n, so this is just the identity, can be represented with a diagram like that. This is the identity. So note that if you apply the trace, as we said, the trace is, you put this inside the trace tangle, which is here, like that. So what you get, and you have to divide by delta power minus 2 here, because it's two box. Yeah. So you make the trace of that, tac, tac. So what you get is one, at the end, what you get is one closed string. So you get one delta. And in the trace, you also divide by delta power minus 2. And here you also have delta power minus 2. So you have delta divided by delta cube. So you get is delta power minus 2, which is the inverse of the index of the subfactor. Here, if you make the trace, tac, tac, you get two closed string. So delta square divided by delta square, 1. So if you are not that comfortable with manipulation with planar tangle, this is the first exercise. You just can try to so it's straightforward, but you can try to show that you can make your own diagram, and you can show that, you can see that. Now, if you apply the Fourier transform of that, so you apply the Fourier transform, the one click. So one click. So you make the star from here to here. You multiply, if you multiply by delta, you make one click. What you get, you have the star, but here. So it's like that, but where the shading is the other shading. Shaded here, unshaded here. So this is the identity, but for the dual two-box space. So the application of the Fourier transform of this dual projection provides the dual of, provides the identity in the dual up to a positive multiplicative constant. In fact, more generally, we define a biprojection to be a projection. So these are projection here, and we see The Fourier transform is also a projection up to a multiplicative constant. Any projection such that the Fourier transform is also a projection up to a multiplicative constant, this is called a biprojection. Biprojection because it's a projection in the two-box space, P2 plus, and also is a P2 minus when you apply the Fourier transform. So it's a projection in the two space, the two-box 2 plus 2 minus, when you apply the Fourier transform up to a multiplicative constant. So a biprojection will be a non-zero projection, so that the application of the Fourier transform is also a projection up to a multiplicative constant. It's a biprojection. Zeff, Landau, and Shangwei Liu prove that a biprojection is equivalent to this statement. So it's equivalent to be a projection such that it contains this Jones projection, the trivial Jones projection, E1. It is equal to its contragradient and equal to the coproduct with itself up to a multiplicative constant, which is here delta with delta inverse is lambda, sorry, with lambda inverse is delta trace of B. This way to formulate biprojection, so it's equivalent, so you can define a biprojection like that if you want now. This is exactly the way to define a subgroup. A subgroup is a group containing the trivial element stable by inverse and by multiplication. So a biprojection is exactly the generalization of the notion of subgroup. And in fact, for a group subfactor plan algebra, the biprojection corresponds to the subgroup. It's we will see here why. You can generate a biprojection from any positive operator in the two-box space. So the two-box space is a finite-dimensional star algebra, finite-dimensional star algebra, von Neumann algebra. So you have from any positive operator, you make this sum. So here, this is the coproduct of A with itself I time. And this theorem of Shangwei Liu show that the coproduct keep the positivity. So if you make the coproduct with itself of a positive operator, it is also positive. So you make such a sum. It's a positive operator. And for n large enough, because everything is finite dimensional, for n large enough, the support, the projection support of that will be constant. For n large enough, this sequence, so if you consider such a sequence on n equal 1, n equal 2, n equal 3, you have a sequence. And for n large enough, the support of that must be constant because it's the support is larger, not necessarily strictly, but larger. And at some moment, it should be constant because it's a finite dimensional star algebra. And this constant support for n large enough is the biprojection generated by this element. And it is exactly the same thing as for group. This is like the subgroup generated by an element. You have an element on the group, and you make the product of the element with itself, and you generate a cyclic group, a subgroup. And here, you can take any positive operator. Not necessarily a minimal projection. You can take any in a group subgroup in a group planar algebra, group subfactor planar algebra. The minimal projection corresponds to the element of the group. So if you generate a subgroup with one element of the group, it's a cyclic group. But you can generate a subgroup with several elements. It's like here, if you consider a positive operator, which decomposes into several minimal projections, which is a sum of several minimal projections. You can also make, so like that, you make the biprojection generated by a positive operator like that. And this is well defined. This is okay, thanks to this theorem of Chang-Wei-Liu called the Schur product theorem. Any two positive operator, their coproduct is also positive. Coproduct keeps the positivity. And in fact, you can see why completely diagrammatically, and this is the magic of this subject because most of the proof are diagrammatical. So everything can be made into picture. So you, why the coproduct of two positive operators is positive? Take AB positive operator. You make the coproduct, this is this diagram. It's a positive operator, any positive operator. There is a notion of square root of a positive operator. So it's a product of two of their square root. You can draw it like that, and you see that it is a product of, this is the adjoint of this. And this is a definition of what is a positive operator. An operator is positive if a lift is of the form x star x. So you directly see, completely diagrammatically, that the coproduct keeps the positivity. Here is the theorem of Dietmar. So theorem of Dietmar that Dietmar proved in the framework of subfactor. So the notion of biprojection in some sense can be defined in terms of subfactor, but if you reformulate the theorem of Dietmar in terms of planar algebra, he said that a projection is a biprojection if and only if it is a joint projection corresponding to an intermediate subfactor. So biprojection, it's a kind of Galois correspondence. Biprojection is exactly intermediate. As we said here, biprojection is like subgroup. And subgroup, the subgroup in a group subfactor, because it's an intermediate. We talk about the Galois correspondence. So biprojection equal intermediate. And let's recall the theorem of Watatani reformulated in the framework of planar algebra. If you reformulate Watatani's theorem discussed in the last video in terms of planar algebra, in the irreducible case, so if the one-box space is one-dimensional, the set of biprojection is a finite lattice. And you denote this lattice E1 identity because E1 is the smallest biprojection. It is included in every biprojection. And identity, this is the biggest, like for group theory, this is the full group, this is the trivial subgroup. And every biprojection is between E1 and identity. Like every subgroup of a group G is contained between the trivial subgroup and G. So you can make, a lattice, and this lattice can be denoted with this interval notation. Everything between E1 and identity. Let's finish with a very beautiful result. Generalizing the Heisenberg uncertainty principle in the framework of subfactor planar algebra. The version with the inequality. There is two versions for the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. There is a version with a commutant of operator which is equal to I, the Planck constant, and a version with an inequality. They are both versions are equivalent. Here, it generalizes the version with inequality. So you can generalize it to any irreducible subfactor planar algebra. So you take an operator x, and R of x will be the range projection of x. And the trace capital T will be the unnormalized trace. We showed before that the trace is normalized. If you don't normalize, you define you denote it with a capital T. The unnormalized trace, and S of x is the unnormalized trace of the range projection of x, S of x. Okay. So the non-commutative uncertainty principle proved by Jiang, Liu, and Wu in 2016 say that for any non-zero operator in the two-box space, the product of S of x and S of its Fourier transform is always greater than or equal to delta square. And if you assume x and f of x to be positive operator, then the equality holds if and only if x is a biprojection. So here it's also fantastic. In fact, you see that biprojection is exactly the one who make this inequality an equality. So the biprojection is the extremizer of this relation. So this is nice. The notion of biprojection is really related to the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. In general, if you don't assume this to be positive, if it is the extremizer are given by what is called B-shift of biprojection. I don't explain what is it here, but you can go to this paper if you are interested. And there is a new topic, recent topic, investigating the planar algebraic Fourier transform. So there are many properties you can generalize from group theory, from analysis, from Fourier analysis. And this new topic is called the quantum Fourier analysis. So this is one example of what is done in the quantum Fourier analysis. But there are many other nice inequality coming from Fourier analysis, which can be generalized in the framework of subfactor planar algebra. And you can go to this paper, an overview of the topic by Jeffe, Jiang Liu Ren Wu, published last year, to have an overview of what is quantum Fourier analysis. Okay, so this is the end of today's lecture. Next video will be about quantum arithmetic.